What's up, guys? Mike Lewis here, and welcome to the Mike Lewis podcast. If you guys want to keep up with me on social media, you can follow me on Instagram at Mike Lewis Official, and you can follow me on Twitter at MikeLew52. It's where most of my updates come. If you're enjoying my content, give me a like and a subscribe. And without further ado, let's just dive right into this episode. Okay, Montana, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing these days? You know, it's not too often we get to keep up with you on social media every single day. So how is life for you these days?
Right. I have renounced all social media. Life is good. I live just outside of Los Angeles. I have an acupuncture practice here. I'm actually at my office right now. And I really enjoy that. I have a lot of autonomy, so I like having my own place, and also just treating people feels good. And I have 2 kids, and so that keeps me pretty busy. And that's about it.
Yeah, I can imagine mom life could keep you in check.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my girls are 9 and 10.
Oh, wow.
So they're really close together, so fighting all the time.
Is that what you had in mind for your career choice before going on to Real World?
No, not really. You know, when I was on Real World, I was in college at the time, living in Manhattan, even though I'm from California, like you and I had talked about. But no, then I was studying archaeology and art history and thought I wanted to go into museum work, and I did for a while. I worked at the Museum of Natural History and the Getty here in Los Angeles. But, you know, to be honest with you, a lot of times when you're working in museums, it's really just kind of a corporate world with the backdrop of art. You're in a cubicle, you're doing that kind of work. And I think I wanted something that was a little bit more one-on-one with people, that was personal. And I was getting acupuncture at the time. Never really thought of it as a career choice, but I just kind of got more and more into it, into studying herbs and alternative medicine, and it went from there.
Wow. It kind of feels like that's a natural thing. You know, sometimes what you initially had in mind for yourself isn't always what ends up happening. You kind of just see something take its course on its own organically, I feel like.
For sure. And I think a lot of times what you study isn't the actuality of what your day-to-day life is like I just mentioned with the art history. And sometimes it comes down to thinking, like, what do you want your day-to-day experience to be?
Right. So we just obviously mentioned before about your absence on social media. Kind of someone like Cyrus from your season, however, is sort of the opposite, very involved on social media. Is that kind of something you wanted to intentionally put on the back burner of the show, or like did it organically kind of just slip away? Like hypothetically speaking, say if somebody recognizes you on the street today and they're like, "Oh, you're Montana on the Real World," would that be something that's weird for you these days or normal?
No, not. I mean, I still do get recognized. Obviously, less as the years have gone on. But when people recognize me, I always say, like, "Oh, well, now I know how old you are," because they're like, remember me from when they were in college. Although now with re-airing them on different platforms, I will get recognized. The other day by a kid in Trader Joe's. I say kid; he was probably in his early 20s, bagging groceries. So that's kind of a trip. But no, the social media stuff wasn't because of anything related to the real world or anybody, you know, or any trolls or anything like that. I just think that I was never really that into it. I saw it as kind of very fronty, like a facade of what people were trying to portray about their lives. And I kind of just prefer a more authentic experience. I do kind of miss like seeing pictures of people's kids, but hey, guess what? They can text them to you too. You know what I mean? But I saw that movie on Netflix, The Social Contract. Was that it? I believe that's the name of it. And I was really into it and what they were saying. And at the end, they asked one guy, well, what should we do? And he said, delete all your social media. And I did. And honestly, I just feel better about it. It doesn't suck up my time. I don't have FOMO. And the exchanges that I have with people are authentic.
I totally hear what you're saying. I'm sort of in the same boat as you with like my mindset of social media. If it was up to me, I would be completely off it, but just for the
Hmm.
specific nature of what I do, of course I need it, for like promotion and whatnot. But that's a very like old school type of mentality that you have, kind of like, and I feel like with the current day and age that we live in, with social media playing like such a big part, it's almost like the exchanges that you guys had. What, when did your seat? It was 97 was your
97, yeah.
back then. It was almost normal to have a conversation with someone in person. Now it's
Hmm.
everything is just through text or, Snapchat, Instagramming and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a time capsule going back and watching it. We had pagers. So think about that for a second.
Well, I mean, yeah, it wasn't your boyfriend broke up with you through the pager, didn't he? That's
No, no. That was over, how dare you? That was over the phone. But you could also get, that was like proto texting, where you could also get text messages on your pager, but you would have to call a number and then tell a person live what you wanted the text to be, and they would type it in and send it to the pager.
oh, okay. Well,
Just a little, what do you call it? A little time capsule for you.
I mean, you were like one of the original cases of like having a relationship brought onto the show, because you
Mhm.
were one of the first real world seasons where a situation like that happened. Do you feel like, hypothetically, if you were to tell like your past self, would you tell yourself not to go onto that show with a relationship?
Well, I mean, it certainly made things sticky. That's for sure. I mean, it's hard to say to go back and, do it like that. I think so. I think that the issue for me was really I was kind of done with my boyfriend at the time. Like I was over it, but I was attached to the relationship. I was really young when we started dating. And so it's just kind of like a weird prospect for me to break up with him. So I kind of had like one foot in, one foot out, if that makes sense. And I wish I would have just had the courage then just to break it off when I left for the show. I mean, left to do the show.
Right. I feel like going on to a show like that in particular is like very hard to maintain any semblance of a relationship that you have going into it. You know what I mean? It's almost like the structure of the show in a way.
Yeah, you would have to be in a very secure relationship. And I think that most 21-year-olds do not fall into that category.
What was your process like getting onto the show, though?
Hmm. The process was fairly long. Started with a tape, sending in a videotape. And then from there turned into a long written application, and then like a phone interview, again proto Skype, where you would videotape yourself, have a speakerphone, they would be asking you questions on the speakerphone, you'd set up the video and then send them the tape of the whole thing. I think so they could see how you look, on or if you're comfortable in front of the camera, that kind of thing. And then from there, it was like in person, meeting in person in New York, and then finally going to Los Angeles for the final interview at Bunim Murray. And then finding out from there. So it was a pretty long and like emotionally exhausting journey.
Yeah, I hear from other people they really drill you on the questions with what they ask.
That too, I think they want to see like if you're really willing to go there and see what your backstory is. And yeah, and also if you're just willing to be vulnerable and be open about your life.
How much of the process with the questions themselves do you remember, if any?
I remember them asking me questions about my relationship, and I remember them asking me questions about my upbringing. I had a fairly like hippie upbringing with a real young mom, and I think I had some issues around that. And like an absentee father. And so I think that they kind of asked me about how my issues were kind of coming up in my adult life, stuff like that. So they do get pretty, into your personal stuff. If they're like, let's talk about your father abandonment issues, and you're like, all right.
Well, that was like the thing back then. I'm pretty sure like they intentionally wanted to ask questions that would like get an emotional response out of
Mhm,
you. I think
mhm.
like apparently the unspoken thing was everybody had to cry
Right.
during their.
I do feel that way too, that they would kind of drill you until you cried, and then they're like, all right, we broke her.
It is kind of wild the process that you just mentioned about having to send in tapes and stuff. Whereas, I mean, I don't even think the real world would even work today. But if it hypothetically did, how much straightforward I feel like the process would be due to like the more heightened media outlets that we have now. Whereas back then it was like really blue collar and they really narrowed it down to the most authentic people.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly is a different process, I would imagine.
Hmm. How did you feel about going to Boston in particular, though? Did you feel like that was a good spot for you guys for a real world season?
I mean, I don't know that Boston is the sexiest town around, and certainly like warm weather clothes. Talk about something that I don't know they would do now is like say, hey, everybody in, big bulky coats for the entirety of the season. Um, but I thought Boston was cool. I like the history of the town, and I was living in New York City at the time and hadn't really spent much time in New England. So I thought it would be a cool experience.
To my knowledge, I'm pretty sure you guys might have been the first cold weather real world location.
It's possible. I'm trying to run them through in my head. Maybe London
London
might
could have
be
been, yeah.
kind of
Well,
gloomy.
yeah. Was Boston inviting though for you guys? The people.
Yes and no, to be honest with you. People have, of course, opinions about the real world in general, and what it would mean to be on the show, and just kind of not wanting it in their city or not wanting it in their neighborhood. And some places were very welcoming and would welcome us in. So it was really kind of a mix. I mean, Boston, after all, is a small town. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's the biggest city in New England, which isn't saying that much. And so I was kind of surprised how, in some ways, it really has kind of more of a small town mentality. And some people, I think, felt like the town was a little bit put upon by our presence.
Yeah. Did you guys ever run into any problems when they told you like you can't film here or?
We didn't. I mean, production may have run into that. Certainly, we had hecklers. Like if we were out filming somewhere, people might shout things at the camera or try to be disruptive or get into the shots in some way. But more so just like punk stuff like that. Like nothing really, too bad.
None of that phased you though, right?
None of the what?
None of that phased you though, right?
No, no, not too much. I mean, honestly, I would kind of heckle them back. I had the backup. I had a whole camera crew. So I had my backup singers behind me.
Yeah. So, how did you feel about maybe the way you were edited or portrayed watching it back? Did you enjoy your edit, or were there some things where you're like, well, I don't know if that really sits right?
Well, I mean, certainly I don't know that I always enjoyed my behavior on it in terms of editing. I mean, there are things, yeah, there are a couple things that I think that with editing I didn't appreciate and I think even kind of resonate nowadays. I mean, but I take responsibility for a lot of the stuff that happened, and I think that a lot of it was fairly accurate. I think that the things that I have issue with specifically, for example, the very first time that I'm introduced to the audience, I'm coming up escalators, at New York train station, and they play Fiona Apple's Criminal. I mean, it's leading, right? So I think that they kind of are trying to lead the audience, give them something very digestible to understand. And even in this season on The Real World, there was the scene of my boyfriend, you had said by text, but it was by phone, where he's calling me a whore repeatedly because of I was seeing somebody else. But the thing is, we had agreed to see other people when I left the show or left for the show. And then he freaked out when it actually happened. People often ask me, like, why didn't you hang up in that scene? And I think that I was really frozen. They say fight or flight, but I was just so taken aback by it. I just froze. And he was calling me a whore repeatedly. And the thing is, and that was aired in this season on. So you have like me getting called a whore with like really no explanation behind it, no context behind it at all. And then also the criminal song. And so it's really planting seeds as to how to feel about me. Um, but it's hard for me with the horror thing because I have different opinions on it. One is just because he was calling me that doesn't mean that they needed to keep it in the show or that MTV needed to air it. And I know that at the time, and I think still currently, they don't say the word whore on MTV. They bleep it out if it's in a song, but apparently not if it's on The Real World. About, I was 21 years old. I was a 21-year-old girl. And that can really follow you. There are people on the street who would bring it up or say it to me. And you have to wonder, at least at first, is someone thinking that about me? I wasn't too hung up on it. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just, like I always tell my kids, one person's going to say something to you and you believe it. Like, you can't do that. You got to just shake it off. People can say whatever they want. It doesn't mean that it's true. But still, I think that would be the one part where I took exception to the editing. And I've actually contacted producers and people at programming and asked them to not air that episode, or at least to air it with more of a context, because I am older now and I'm a business owner and I don't need to go back and get called a whore again when, I don't think there's like a bigger context to. I mean, it's like the original slut shaming, right? I'm
Right.
just doing what I said I was going to do, date other people. And by the way, he was dating someone else too. And so then he calls me a whore, and then that's what I end up getting labeled for.
Yeah. Today, if a situation like that occurred, they would cut it out of the program. They would not like even show it, I feel, with the direction they've
I
taken.
would, yeah, I would, yeah, especially now. I would hope so. Um, yeah, I would hope that they would not do that now. So that's the part that I take exception to. Everything else, to be honest with you, on the show, I can own to one degree or another. And like I said, I'm not like thrilled by my behavior always, but I was 21. And, some of it I stand behind, some I regret. But, I've come to terms with the whole experience now.
Well, what are some things on your end that you think you would take back?
Things that I would take back. I think in general, I'll just give kind of a general idea. I think that sometimes I inserted myself in business that really wasn't mine to be involved in. And I think that that's one thing that I learned, and one thing that I saw on the show that I didn't like about myself. But in terms of like dating other people, or like, again, like thinking that I was cheating on my boyfriend, that was never the case. It was the case that I was leaving, and kind of gave him an ultimatum of like, we can break up or we can date other people. And, again, like, I think just the labeling because of that. And I think if it was a man, it wouldn't have been an issue at all.
Mm. How did you feel about that situation with you when I think you guys, what was your daycare was your job on the show? How did you feel about how that situation went down?
Oh, well, of course, that was really hard to handle, and obviously embarrassing to get fired from a volunteer job at all, but also just on television. But that was a case where, and again, this was a situation where they had said I gave alcohol to kids, which is totally untrue, and also something that can follow you. People don't bring that up too much with me, although it is out there on the internet. And I know when my kids have looked it up, they were like just shocked and really upset. They were like, "You gave kids alcohol?" I said, "No, I never did." They had snuck it when I was when they were under my care. And it wasn't until after, they were like 1-ounce shot glasses. We were at like a food and wine sampling event. And so they had these little samples of beer and wine. So they had like a 1-ounce sample of beer. I didn't really think it was a big deal at the time. You know what I mean? I really didn't. In retrospect, I should have just gone straight to the guy who ran the center and was like, here's what happened, right? Because it's never the crime, it's always the cover up. So I think at the time I was like, geez, let's just keep this, on the down low. Like, we don't have to tell anybody. I didn't tell the kids to keep it secret. I just didn't notify like any superiors about it. And I thought that 1 ounce of beer wasn't going to affect their health or anything. So that was that. I mean, and that's a harsh punishment for it. I understand the decision that the after school center had to make. But yeah, it was painful and it was embarrassing for sure. The work that I went on to do at the homeless shelter was rewarding for me. So I appreciated that. In that aspect, things kind of ended a little bit better than they could have. But certainly going back in time, I just would have gone straight to the after school program director and been like, here's what's happened. But also, I was in charge of two 12-year-olds and we were at a food and wine like fair. And it's kind of hard to, be wrangling these kids when we were supposed to go take them to, they didn't want to pay for lunch. So they said, take these kids to this food and wine fair, like give them samples of stuff for lunch. And it was this huge convention center with a lot of people around. And it's just kind of hard for me to keep track of them in that environment.
What did production have to say about when that went down?
Production really didn't say anything to me about it. There was not any, because they didn't, production doesn't really communicate with you unless there's like, or, especially in our earlier seasons, I don't think that they intervened hardly at all. So they were there for the firing. I think that I could have probably been kicked out of the house. That was not the decision that the roommates had made. And it was never brought up to me by the producers that you should leave or you should not leave or you should even go find another volunteer position. They never said any of that. That just kind of all unfolded organically.
Mm. So when you got done filming the show, obviously, and had to watch it back, did it ever test you, like, emotionally watching yourself back? Was it ever hard to watch yourself, or did you not have that issue?
Yeah, it is, of course, hard to watch myself. I think I'm hard on myself anyway. I don't like to look at pictures of myself or listen to my voice on answering machines. So you can imagine how annoying it would be to see yourself like in action. But I did watch each episode and I watched them once. I didn't want to like obsess about it or, dissect them too much. But of course I did want to see what was out there.
Any moments that where you kind of, you look at and you're like, or
Well, all of the ones I just mentioned, obviously there were a lot of fun times as well. But yeah, all of the ones I just mentioned, getting fired on TV, getting called a whore, all of that stuff, which I'm sure, at some point, if we do reunions or things like that, these are all things that'll have to be brought up. But
so where do you stand on the line of missing the social media wave, or would you have wanted it to be around to maybe turn it into something for yourself or use it to leverage yourself hypothetically?
no, I really wasn't interested in doing any kind of acting or anything like that after the show or even before the show. It was never my aspiration. I think that back then it was a lot of college kids, that were just kind of doing their thing. And no, I'm glad it wasn't then because I imagine, people have harsh things to say, especially when it's not to your face. And when we were first did the show, there were chat rooms and things like that, posting boards. So I did kind of see the beginnings of that. But no, I'm glad I wasn't around just to get DMs from people or, I'm not into it now. I can't imagine that I would have been that into it back then either.
Yeah. So no opportunities, presented themselves for you, like for the show, like were you reached out to maybe do any speaking engagements or post-show appearances?
Oh yeah, I did a lot of speaking engagements and appearances after the initial show, probably for maybe 5 years after I would go do things like that. But again, I was always really focused on my college career, my studies. I was still in college and also the work I was doing.
What were those engagements about? Like, did they have like a theme or anything to them, or?
Sometimes it would just be like straight question answer, or you might make appearances. Sometimes people would want you to come and be part of like an orientation for college, and you would have to like talk about diversity training or something like that, and talk about how that might apply to the real world and how it might apply to college life or things like that. But for the most part, it was just kind of light stuff, and people just wanted to see you and ask questions.
Wow, it must have felt like being a big shot then, right?
I guess. I mean, not really. I never really had that attitude that I was a big shot because I was on TV, or never really saw it as something that made me really special. I mean, real world is definitely part of the culture, and people in my age group definitely remember it and have fond feelings for it. But it really hasn't defined me. It's not that I've tried to push it away. It's just something that I did, and I didn't, I'm not an actress. That's not what I wanted to do.
Hmm. But you're open to a homecoming, though, right?
Yeah, I would be open to a homecoming. I think I would probably have to answer all of the same questions that you just asked me, and have to kind of go into that a little bit. But like I said, I stand by some of the stuff, and other stuff I have perspective on and certainly would do differently now.
Has there been any movement made towards a homecoming for you guys?
That's all in the hands of like, that's out of my control at this point. That's all in the hands of production now.
Do you feel like you guys would be able to round it out?
What do you mean by that? You mean like have a full cast?
Yeah. Like, what would be holding it back?
Yeah, again, I think that there are a lot of issues that go into production, including filming in original locations and the schedule of cast members. So I think really all the stars have to align. It's possible, I'm hoping so. I haven't, I hope so. Let me put it that way.
Hmm. Have you gotten any calls for All Stars at all?
I have, but my challenge days are behind me.
Why? Those were never your thing?
Well, no, it's just that I don't enjoy matching short sets, and I don't enjoy bungee jumping. And if you combine those two, then definitely I would not enjoy that. No, it's just not my milieu. You know what I mean? I don't care to jump off things. I don't I like I said, I just don't want to wear a shirt with my name on it anymore. Like I'm just too old for that. I don't even like to share a bathroom. Can you imagine how I'd feel about going on the challenge with Beth Stolarczyk on the top bunk? No, no, no. But I would do real world homecoming for sure. That I would be excited about.
Oh, there I am.
Yeah, you froze up a little bit there.
Oh, am I back now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned Beth. Back in the day, you guys had quite the rivalry, but from what fans have seen on social media, they know, you guys have been in parties together recently. How did you
Mhm.
guys patch that up?
Well, I think it's just a lot of time as well. I mean, last time I saw Beth prior to recently was 15 years ago or more. And so, I mean, if you're still mad at something that happened on a reality show from 15 years ago, you got to look at yourself, not the other person. And to be honest with you, I never like hated Beth. It was more of like a frenemy situation. I enjoy hating on Beth, not even currently, but you know what I mean? It was more to me like a fun rivalry, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, and you guys had that tug of war too. That was quite the battle. How long did that go on for, would you say?
Minutes. I mean, it's a long time though when you're doing the tug of war. Yeah, reverse tug of war. That game kind of sucks because I will tell you why. I'm no physicist, but it really just comes down to weight. And every single time I've seen reverse tug of war, no matter the strength of your will or character, the person who weighs the most comes out. And I really fought because I did want to beat Beth, and I wanted to win that particular gauntlet. Um, and I really did try my hardest. In fact, when I was flying home from getting eliminated, I had bruises all around my midsection from where the belt was to the point that it was painful to put on the seat belt, even for the airplane. So, I mean, I really gave it 100% of what I could do. But again, she had weight on me.
Yeah. So now, obviously, being like this long removed from yours and Beth's rivalry, could you look back on it now and maybe think that like maybe she might have been misunderstood in the villain role a little bit, or?
No, I think that people understood her pretty well.
So you think it was
No, do you see? I just still like to hit. It's just too easy. It's just too easy.
like why do you feel
Listen,
at
there are
that
things that I
time?
really respect about Beth for sure. She's a hustler, and I have always appreciated her hustle.
Why do you feel like at that time in particular you guys clashed though?
You know, I don't even know why we clashed. We were on one of the first challenges together, when it was real small, like 5 people in an RV kind of thing. And we started off being friendly. And I don't even really remember how. I just had always, at least back then, I'm not saying now, I thought she was kind of underhanded in her dealings, like kind of sneaky. And I think that that was kind of my reigning thought.
The Gauntlet 2 in particular, they call them confessionals when they give you guys your interviews on the
Yeah.
show. And every time there's the main confessional that was used when regarding Beth on the Gauntlet 2, it would just cut to you giving a commentary. And because I went back and watched earlier today.
Oh,
And
really?
it was,
Did you
yeah.
have any gems? Was there anything I said?
I think you said something around the lines of like Beth, she just like sucks as a person.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, what can I say about that? I think that's how I was feeling at the time. I really have a hard time controlling things that like I feel and say. And I think they call it emotional dysregulation. And if you look at people in reality TV, a lot of them have it. Like I really just cannot, muzzle a lot of what I say. And so if I'm thinking at the time that she sucks as a person, like I'm going to say it.
So how did you guys get connected? I assume like Cyrus maybe played a part in reconnecting you guys.
Yeah.
I would assume, right?
Yeah, I think, Cyrus throws parties. I think he's a party promoter by
Yes.
trade. So he throws parties. Sometimes there'll be like viewing parties for challenges or things like that I'll get invited to. And I really always have a good time when I go to those things. And I'll tell you something about all of the real world and road rules people are very fun to hang out with. Like they know how to have a good time. And I always feel like it's my people, and whatever mixed feelings I might have about the real world or any of the experience, those are my people. And I always feel like I always have a seat at the table when I show up.
Yeah, no doubt. No thing can be said besides that all these people were casted for a reason. You know what I mean? Like they may clash while they're on the show, but once the cameras are off, I think they could all differentiate, the show from real life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's like a heightened situation too, of course, when you're in a house with the cameras and you're around each other all the time. And, um, it's just kind of like a powder keg waiting to go off.
So did you know on the Gauntlet 2 that that was going to be your last one? Did you think maybe because I mean there were newer casts coming
Mhm.
up in the challenge, like did you feel like you had overstayed your welcome on the last one or?
No, I mean, and I was only 30, and the last challenge, all of us were about that age. Cyrus and Timmy and Beth and all of them were 30 or older. I think just for me, my life was just taking a different direction. I said to Robin, who was on the challenge, I said, "This is my last challenge." And she said, "Never say never." And, I considered it for a minute recently
What, coming back?
for the All Stars. Yeah, I considered it. But then again, see short set comment. No, it's actually pretty hard for me to leave my life. Like I have a business, I have an office. I would have to find a replacement. I'd have to shut it down. I'd have to find childcare for my kids. And it's not something my life isn't something where I can just drop of a hat, like go to Costa Rica and do balance beam challenges. You know what I mean? Like I have a lot of responsibilities here. So it takes a lot for something to pull me away.
What about back in the day, like following Gauntlet 2? Were there like still calls coming, and was there like a conversation said like, oh, I think like I'm done with that chapter? Or
I don't believe, to my recollection, I don't believe that I was asked to do another challenge until more recently from then. I probably told the producers I was done doing challenges, would be my guess. Or, they heard me say it. And it's not like it's something that I excelled on. I always say, unless you count hooking up with people as excelling, and then in that case, I excelled on all of the challenges I was on. I'm just saying there are different ways to excel,
Yeah.
But no, it's, like I am like a real worlder, not a road rulers. Do you know what I mean by that? There's a difference. There's different species. There's a difference between the two. And I'm for sure a real worlder.
Yeah, it's a new saying. It's called "I'm here for a good time, not a long time." I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, what's that? But in regards to what? Oh, I see what you're saying. Into going to the challenge. Yes.
Yes. I'm here for a good time, but I don't want this to be a whole lifetime. Yeah.
I got it. Yes.
So you were still in the game at this point when that first incident happened on the Gauntlet 2. I don't know if you remember this. We're going to refresh your brain here. Do you remember night 1 of that last challenge you did? I think it was Joe.
Yeah.
You were there for that?
I was there for that. I remember that night well, actually. And if you have seen that one recently, there's a scene that I know that made the show of me trying to convince her to stay. And to actually just stay for the night. I was like, give it one night. Because she was kind of freaked out, I think, by like the social scene and the partying. And but I was like, look, it's really not, I don't think what you think it is. Like, come downstairs and just hang out. I don't know what happened to her. I can't say for sure. I would actually like to go back and watch it. Because I think sometimes, and I don't know about this case in particular, there's mental health stuff that comes up that I think, excuse me, if you saw it on the show now, it would be recognized as that. And I think even, for example, on my season, Genesis was really depressed during that time for good cause. But I kind of always thought she was like lame and like get out of bed. And when I went back and kind of revisited some of it and really thought about it, I'm like, wow, she was really depressed. And I think nowadays, like that would be recognized maybe by the producers or maybe by the audience even. And so I know that I've seen some things on the show and even challenges I've been on where I see some mental health stuff happening. And I don't know if that's what happened that night, but I suspect there might be some of that.
Could have been. But I think a lot of that might have had to do with the fact that I think she was like 10 years or something or more removed from her stint on the show, because that was her first challenge. I think she was the third Real World. And then she didn't do a challenge like right following her season. It was like a big gap, so I guess maybe that environment might have been overwhelming for her, maybe.
I think so. And it is an intense social scene. You have maybe, 15, 14 people in a house that all consider themselves like, HBIC. And so I think it can be really intense. But like I said, I don't know. I think she did feel overwhelmed by it, but I don't think that what was going on was that intense, to be honest with you. Like we kind of had music on and there was drinking, but it wasn't like the most raucous thing you've ever seen, on any of the shows. So I feel like her reaction, I've never really understood. I thought it was over the top at the time, and I still kind of don't fully understand it.
Right. And you mentioned about the mental health thing. Do you feel like there should be more of like a program in place for reality TV personalities in regards to their mental health? Because I proposed this idea in a couple of my episodes. I think that as soon as a cast member gets done filming, they should have some type of social bubble in place, not where they're isolated, but like in a place where they could interact, but in a smaller setting before letting them out and releasing them into
the wild.
Yeah,
Like you do
essentially.
with a goldfish when you like keep it in the bag and then you like slowly release it into the aquarium.
Right.
I don't know about that. I mean, I would say it would be nice to have kind of readily on hand somebody to talk to. I think that if you're 21, 22 on the show, and then you're kind of having a character kind of structured for you, like I said, that can be hard coming off of that, kind of having that label and understanding where you fit in, or having other people, tell you things about yourself, good or bad. So I think it would be nice to have like a therapist that was really on call. I know that the production company that we worked with had always said, if you ever like really need anything, if you're feeling like really down, like we can put you in touch with people. So I think that they were kind of aware of it, but it wasn't something that was like, hey, go see this therapist. You know what I mean? It was like, if you're suicidal, we can help you.
Right, yeah. But I appreciate you taking the time out and hopping on today. I had a fun time chatting with you, and hopefully we see you in the future.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
No problem. Have a
All right.
great rest of your day.
Take care.